All right, let's jump right into this. We are talking about a really important safety directive that affects one of the most successful aircraft families ever built, the Airbus A320. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA, has flagged a potential problem that impacts every single one of these planes. And believe me, it's an issue that goes right to the heart of the aircraft.
So, to get us started, here's a question for you. On a plane as advanced as the A320, what is it that physically stops its electronic brain from just, well, shaking loose under all the incredible stress of flight? The answer is hiding in a piece of equipment that most people will never, ever see.
And that piece of equipment is the 80VU avionics rack. The best way to think about it is as the protective skeleton for the aircraft's entire central nervous system. It's tucked away down in the avionics bay, and its job is to hold all the critical computers that manage pretty much everything, from navigation all the way to the flight controls.
And look, that's the first big takeaway here. This isn't just some random piece of metal, it's an absolutely critical and hidden component. Its structural integrity is completely non-negotiable for a safe flight.
It's actually kind of mind-blowing how much relies on this single rack. You've got your flight control computers, your communication systems, and your navigation units all living here. Basically, the very systems that let the pilots fly the plane safely are all counting on this one structure staying perfectly locked down.
But here's the issue. Reports coming in from airlines all over the world are starting to show a pretty disturbing pattern. Maintenance crews are finding attachment holes that have been stretched out of shape. They're finding these little support dampers, they're called bushes, that have either shifted around or just gone missing entirely. And they're even finding cracks forming in the rack itself. And this is all just from the normal, everyday stress of flying.
And you can probably guess where this is going. These seemingly small things can add up really fast, escalating into a much bigger problem, the very real threat of a complete structural failure of the rack.
And you can see exactly how this happens. It's a total domino effect. It all starts with the constant vibration and the heavy G-forces of flight. That stress starts to elongate the attachment holes and pushes those little support bushes out of place. Next thing you know, fasteners work themselves loose and disappear. Well, that puts even more stress on what's left, which leads to cracks, and finally, you get to the unthinkable risk of the entire rack breaking away.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The directive itself lays out the ultimate risk in really stark terms. If that rack fails, you could be looking at cables or even entire computers getting disconnected. And the absolute worst-case scenario, the pilots having reduced control of the aircraft, possibly during the most critical times, like takeoff or landing. This is exactly what these new rules are designed to prevent.
So, the big question is, how is the industry actually going to tackle this? And that brings us to EASA's mandatory safety plan to get way out ahead of this risk.
Okay, the official response comes in the form of this: Proposed Airworthiness Directive 25-147. An airworthiness directive, or an AD, is basically a mandatory safety order. You can think of this document as the new rulebook for every single A320 family aircraft, and it spells out exactly how this problem has to be found and fixed.
Now, it's really important to know this isn't some brand new problem that just appeared out of nowhere. This new proposal is actually an update to a directive from back in 2022. The key changes are that it brings in the very latest service bulletins. Those are the repair instructions from Airbus. And here's some good news for operators. It actually extends the inspection deadlines for certain aircraft that have already been modified.
So this new rule applies to the entire A320 family, but not every plane gets treated the exact same way. EASA has actually split the fleet into 4 different groups based on their maintenance history. Group 1, those are the planes without any of these relevant modifications. They have a pretty straightforward 48-month deadline from when they were built. For all the other groups, well, they've had specific repairs or updates, so their inspection timelines are all based on those very specific instructions.
Okay, so what does this all mean on the hangar floor? Let's break down what the airlines and their maintenance teams are actually going to have to do.
The new rules are super specific. Maintenance teams have to perform these really focused inspections on 3 key zones of the rack. And the rules are strict. If you find a crack or a hole that's stretched out by more than ½ millimeter, that plane is grounded until it's repaired, period. There are absolutely no exceptions, and every single finding has to be reported back to Airbus so they can track the overall health of the fleet.
And for the airlines, yeah, this has a real impact on their operations. Each one of these inspections is estimated to take somewhere between 4 and 8 hours. That's a pretty significant chunk of downtime that now has to be scheduled into regular maintenance checks, which, could definitely affect how many planes they have available to fly.
So for the folks in airline management, this whole directive creates a real balancing act. On one hand, it's a massive win for safety, no question about it. But on the other hand, it adds operational complexity with all these new repetitive tasks, financial costs for labor and any repairs, and a pretty big compliance burden to track everything across their whole fleet. Juggling all of that is the real challenge here.
So what happens next? Let's take a look at the timeline for putting this whole plan into action across the entire industry.
This timeline gives us a pretty clear picture of where we are. The old directive has been in effect since 2023. This new proposal was just issued, and that kicks off a really crucial consultation period. The entire industry now has until October 14, 2025, to provide their feedback before the final rule gets published and becomes official.
And that feedback process, it's absolutely critical. This is the chance for the airlines, the maintenance shops, and the leasing companies to all share their real-world experience. EASA is actively looking for this input because they want to make sure the final rule is not only effective, but also practical to implement.
You know, when you step back, this whole process leaves you with a final thought. This directive, focused on one tiny component out of millions, is just a perfect example of this complex, totally invisible web of safety checks that are happening constantly behind the scenes. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other unseen tasks just like this are being done every single day just to make sure that every single flight we take is a safe one?